Moira is broken. Yes, very, very broken. A lot of people are going to disagree with me, but I'm going to outright tell you she completely and absolutely outperforms every healer in the game. And while not quite at the level of the reworked Mercy, she is still one of those sleeper picks that cannot be ignored. Today, we're going to explore the 5 main reasons by ability of why she is so broken and how you can learn how to master those abilities to climb up the ladder like nobody's business. My name is Nathan, and this is Blizzard Guides. Now, before I get into this video, I'd like to know what hero you'd like to see featured next on this channel, and also if you have any comments in general, I'll be reading them, so if you need any advice, feel free to let me know. Also, this guide is by ability with some significantly more advanced techniques after each of the 5 points. So at number 5, we have Moira's just stupidly powerful healing. At 80 heals per second per ally, she is able to output upwards of 400 heals per second. This makes her absolutely insane when it comes to tightly knit comps, and more importantly, triple and quad tank setups. She is able to out heal pretty much any burst damage, and with a 9-second ammo reserve, she is pretty much left unstoppable when it comes to healing. She actually outclasses every healer in the game when it comes to raw stats. In order to master Moira's healing potential, there are 3 main tips that you must get down. Primarily, you need to learn target priority, as you are on a reserve, so you can't just hold down left click indefinitely. You must be consistently mindful of the other healer's positioning and their ability to heal other allies, since you want them to heal any allies that aren't in danger and in reach of each other, so as not to waste any of your healing uptime. Identifying who might be in trouble and who will need your powerful burst heals next is the main thing you need to learn when playing Moira. Secondly, you must always play with your tanks whenever not actively healing. Your range is not very long, so you always have to be in reach of those who come in priority. If you play with your tanks, you're generally going to be in a position to heal everyone in a safe space, so while you are playing with your tanks for the necessity of healing your tanks, you are playing with your tanks for the availability of positioning to your allies. And lastly, don't be afraid to use up all of your healing juice. I see a lot of Moiras, myself included, being too afraid to use up all of their healing. You get your ult very quickly, and you do have your orb on cooldown, so if the situation is proper, you can get away with using up the last bit. Really, when it comes down to Moira, her main kit is around healing. She is a support and she is a healer after all, so I know a lot of Moiras like to do a lot of damage, but the main power comes from her healing. The only mistake a lot of Moiras make is their target priority, which is why a lot of people think that Moira isn't a very strong main healer, but I assure you she is a main healer if she's used under the right hands. You need to manage your healing resource properly with a very strong target priority. It comes down really just to that. Maximizing the ability of your healing will maximize your skill as Moira. At number 4, we're taking a look at most likely the most powerful part of her kit, Fade. Moira's Fade is very much so the most broken part of her kit because it is on a 6-second cooldown. Basically, if the enemy can't kill you in 6 seconds, you're pretty much guaranteed to be alive. You are granted with the most powerful movement ability in the game. Your Fade is on a 6-second cooldown, so it is essentially a get out of jail free card, so use it as such. There are 2 main tips when it comes to properly using Fade. Firstly, you want to make sure that you use it when you need it and not simply use it just to stand idle. Fade is best served whenever you are in threat of something high burst, so if a tracer has a pulse bomb stuck to you, or you're about to be scattered by Hanzo, or perhaps you're getting hooked, you need to always be prepared for that. Being mindful of your surroundings and any imminent threats are the key to good Fades. It's a kind of rhythm that you need to get down. Basically, you just don't want to use Fade for the purpose of using Fade. There always has to be a purpose in mind, so whether it be closing that gap between a low health ally or dodging an enemy burst ability, you always have to have a purpose in mind. Don't ever waste it, because while it is on a 6-second cooldown, it isn't very forgiving in the middle of a team fight, which actually brings me to my next point. Secondly, you want to use Fade as an escape, not as an engagement. That's the biggest mistake a lot of players make when they don't truly understand the ability. So while it is on a 6-second cooldown, in the middle of a huge team fight, this isn't going to be particularly forgiving. You can't really use it to engage unless you know you can avoid the damage for the next 6 seconds, because as a healer, you do constantly have a big target on your back. And now for some miscellaneous tips. Always jump after you Fade, it'll give you some extra distance, and also you can Fade right before coalescing to gain a better spot since you can't Fade when using your ult. And number 3, we have Moira's ult Coalescence. There isn't really much to be said about this ult, so this section will be pretty short. It is by far Moira's most underwhelming aspect, as it doesn't really have that much damage or healing associated to it. It has these really cool effects and this really cool name, but it really doesn't do much other than just healing and doing damage at the same time. It does pretty much the same healing and pretty much the same damage just at the same time. In addition to this, you also actually don't use up any healing resource, so it applies best in 3 scenarios. Primarily clutches. Moira regenerates health like I mentioned when using your ult, so using it to clutch clutch a 2v3 or something like that is its most common use. While it is somewhat underwhelming, it is still an ultimate ability, so using it to provide an advantage in a fight is really powerful. Another use would be to use it whenever you run out of healing. You can use it to regen a bit of healing and use it to do a bit of extra damage as well, and just to heal yourself in addition to this. And lastly, it's just really good for following up on damage if one of your DPS dies. You can use it to provide a bit of extra advantage, like I mentioned in the clutch scenario, to pick up the weight from your DPS dying. You can also use it to just really finish up any enemies that are trying to run away, because it does aid in that lack of range that you do have as Moira. At number 2, we have Moira's orbs. Moira's orbs are also not that complex, so this section will be a bit shorter as well. The most common question when it comes to orbs is which to use, and actually it's pretty simple. Quite simply, the orbs are your only range. So if you're in range to deal damage but not to heal, use healing orb. If you're in range to do heals but not to do damage, use damage orb. However, if you do need a bit of extra damage or a bit of extra healing, you can use your healing orb while you're in range to heal but maybe out of range to do damage. It's kind of situational, but the rule of thumb is if you don't know which one to use and both scenarios are good, use your healing orb, because 300 heals is objectively better than 200 damage. If you see an enemy that is low health, using your damage orb is probably better. And if you absolutely need to heal an ally that is out of range of all of your heals and desperately needs heals, use your orb to heal him. Basically, it just comes down to this fact. Your orbs are really only there to cover up the weaker aspects of your kit, so you can just use them for when you need a boost. That's personally the way I look at it, and it helps me to improve my decision making when it comes to orb usage. Also, if you're going to use your damage orb, throw it into small rooms or at individual enemies. Throwing it at a cluster of enemies really only annoys them more than anything. Try and use it to finish off enemies, not to tickle them. So if you do want to throw it at a cluster of enemies, wait till most of them have passed, but then use your damage orb so that you can pick off the healers that are in the backline. And also, lastly, just one quicker tip, bounce it off the floor if you can, or bounce it off a wall. Basically, if you bounce it in such a way that it will return to where you threw it from, you effectively double the distance that it's going to travel, because it's going to travel for that short distance where it's still in range to heal or do damage, and then also it's going to bounce back and still be in that range. So bouncing it is always a good idea. You really never want to throw it out into the air unless you're going for a very long range shot. And lastly, we have Moira's damage. Moira's damage is actually really crazy. And while yes, Moira is a healer, and yes, you should primarily heal, if you're doing really good healing and really good damage, you can often get both gold healing and both gold damage medals. It's really ridiculous the amount of damage she can output. She is also very capable of dueling because of her lifesteal mechanic, the orbs, and her fade. While this isn't the best part of her kit, I did want to mention this one last so that you knew about proper dueling when it comes to Moira, because you need the context of the other abilities to be able to explain this. There are 3 main parts to dueling. First, always save your fade for proper usage. This one kind of goes back to what I mentioned in the fade tips. You want to save your fade for whenever the enemy is going to be using their burst ability, because in the game of Overwatch, most high damage abilities are on the same 6-second cooldown. So if you time it properly, you can actually manage the enemy's abilities using your fade properly. You can force them to use it and put it on cooldown so that you can actually escape that extra damage, and then in the meantime, while you're outside of fade, you can use the lifesteal mechanic to heal yourself up, and then if you need it, you have your healing orb, or you can do extra damage with your damage orb. Being able to duel effectively is the strongest aspect of Moira's kit. And secondly, whenever you're dueling, use your healing orb primarily and not your damage. The only situations that you would really want to use your damage orb in a duel is if they're running away from you. You don't want to peek a corner that they might have, a Hanzo scatter arrow or a trap or something like that set up. You can use your damage orb to bounce it around a corner, but really you want to be using it for healing when you're not in imminent danger and needing to do extra damage. You really just kind of want to use your healing orb as much as possible, because that will keep you sustained and alive as long as possible. And third, just try and use your melee whenever you're dueling, since that will do a bit more burst damage than your right click. And for the last part in this video, we're looking at Moira's techs. First off, we have fade jumping. Fade jumping is one of the hardest parts to master, so before you attempt to do this consistently, spend time mastering the tips I mentioned before. So the way you fade jump is actually really simple. The timing is just what gets you. You essentially fade onto a short object, so be that a bench or a box or something small like that. It really just kind of has to be half height or below that, and then you hit space as soon as you come into contact with that object while in fade, and then you will be propelled upwards. This is very useful to escape situations and to get into positions that the enemy might not expect. This is your really only verticality movement that you have, so if you do master this, you get an entire new aspect of Moira's kit that was previously unknown to you. To quickly go over some other tips, you can fade through enemies, so use that if you're stuck in a corner or a hallway. You can fade standing still to avoid enemy fire, that's also particularly useful, and you can also quickly switch from right click to heals, so if you're not going to be in need of any burst healing, you can hold down right click with little to no penalty. It doesn't really matter. The only thing that will happen is if you're hiding around a corner, that does extend a bit forward, so if the enemy does see that, you might give away your positioning, so maybe not in that situation, but if you're in the middle of a team fight, it doesn't really hurt to hold down your right click. And lastly, if you are healing, you can jitter your camera so that you get a bit of extra spread, which maximizes your healing a bit more. Anyway, I hope these tips helped you guys out. Let me know in the comments down below if you like this style. I try to mix a bit of beginner fundamental tips and also some more advanced techniques as well. Personally, I like the style of video where you take a look at the beginner fundamentals because sometimes you do forget those things, and marrying those to the advanced techniques really helps you solidly understand them and master every aspect of the kit and understand it a little bit better, so that if there isn't completely, a comprehensive guide out there for that specific hero, if you do learn the fundamentals in tandem with the advanced techniques, you can actually come up with your own advanced techniques and start to learn the hero at the deepest level possible. Anyway, let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought about this video, and also don't forget to leave a like as it really helps us know that you guys are enjoying the content, and don't forget to subscribe as we have a lot of epic moments videos so that you can see the best highlights in Overwatch, and we have tips and tricks videos just like this so that you can be the best Overwatch player that you can be. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Have a nice day. My name is Nathan, and this was Blizzard Guides.